Hi everyone, welcome to the third episode of Beyond Asanas conversation with Laruga Glaser. My name is Protima and I'm the founder of True Bay India, India's first homegrown premium Ashtanga yoga workshop and events organizer. My first guest in the series is Laruga Glaser, and I'm happy to have her back on the third episode of Conversations Beyond Asanas. Um, so today I want to start by taking this opportunity to read out two student testimonials among the innumerable ones I received post the workshop with Laruga and David earlier this year in February when they had come for the first time to Mumbai for a workshop in India. So this person has requested anonymity for the following email, and so I won't be reading out her name. This is what she said. I'm writing in to express my gratitude for all the love, wisdom, and warmth that you have shared over these past few days. I'm a beginner in the Ashtanga tradition. That said, I have made several attempts to join a Mysore class over the last few years, but haven't really found one yet. But that hasn't stopped me from practicing. I had optic neuritis a few years ago, and I lost vision in my left eye. For this, I was given high doses of injectable steroids, and as a result, I gained a lot of weight, and I now suffer from a vascular necrosis in the heads of both femurs. What does this mean? Well, that means that the bones in the hip and thigh are dying, and that is why it's called necrosis. I share this with you because these are the obstacles that I have to overcome every morning when I come to the mat. The pain in my hip is just more or less, but always there. These last 4 days at this workshop with Laruga and David have been magical. Things that I normally can't do happen so easily and effortlessly, and things that are normally so easy were impossible. Because you challenged me, Laruga and David, and I'm so grateful for that. When a senior teacher in the tradition acknowledges things that a beginner can do or does to stick with the practice, it's very reassuring. Others often look down upon what is a beginner's reality, and this can be discouraging. But Laruga beautifully acknowledged these things. She said, get into the shape of the pose in the best that you can. Both you and David offered adjustments which not only left me lighter but also confident, because I now know what to do, how to try, and most importantly, why I'm doing it. You were always there when I needed you for an adjustment. How did you even know? Because of my curvy body type with other teachers, I didn't feel welcome. This is the first time I not only felt welcome, but I felt like I belonged here. This made my practice flow more natural because my mind was at ease. It didn't feel like I had to prove anything or prove my worthiness of being at this workshop. Thank you so very much. This is from another Mumbai workshop participant, Pramila Varyani, who was in tears when the workshop ended. This is what she sent me by text. Her wisdom is so overwhelming that I have been in tears. I'm just so glad and fortunate that I got to do this workshop. And I do wish the whole of Mumbai got to do the experience as well. Thank you so much, and keep bringing them back. So I wanted to read these two testimonials among the innumerable ones that I received post Laruga and David's workshop in Mumbai earlier this year in Feb. And now I'm going to add Laruga onto the live chat. Hi, Laruga.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, and welcome to the third episode of Conversations Beyond Asana with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So I wanted to read those two testimonials on before you came on, just to sort of highlight how, without you having to say, what a fabulous teacher you are and David are, and the partnership that both of you brought to the, to the MISO practice, to the room, and how the number of participants who've written mails and sent messages saying how grateful they were for the experience with you. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank you and just have read out just two of the testimonials that came post your workshop.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, just hearing them was really touching, and you never know what effect you have. And one thing I will have to say that for me personally, it's always an honor to teach alongside David, who is my boyfriend, but also sometimes we get to teach together. I really feel we complement. Like, he fills in the gap where I lack, and I fill in the gap where he lacks, and it just, I don't know. I just really enjoy teaching with him, and he sees other things. I see other things, and I just always enjoy it so much. And I just have to say that, with him alongside me, that's what kind of elevated it so much. And it's a lot of it's due to him as well, because he also has a different way. And I feel like I wish we could teach more together.
Yeah. Yeah,
We might have to
you're
make
the
that happen.
perfect yin and yang. You're the perfect yin and yang in the room, and I was so grateful that both of you could make it.
Yeah, we really enjoyed it. And like, in many ways, Mumbai exceeded my expectations
I'm
because
so glad.
yeah, because I've been to India many times, but never Mumbai. And I just really enjoyed the city. And I know there's so much more to discover there, but what I did see, I really enjoyed the vibe of the city. So it was a pleasure.
So I hope you can come back again with
Yeah,
David.
for sure. For sure.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in because there are lots of questions today.
Okay.
Okay, so basically what we're going to do is I'm going to ask only one question because of the paucity of time, which is
Okay.
mine. And the rest are all the questions that, the viewers have sent for you to answer.
Okay.
So, the question I'd like to ask you is that, tons of us have had questions for you. You've, had conferences and all of that. Is there been a particular question or questions that you wish participants or students asked you?
I really, that's not really always something that comes into mind. I just like when people are just willing, whatever the topic is, to go a bit deeper. Like, and that's kind of giving a very broad answer, but when students are just kind of tapping into things, whether that's in asana, whether that's in philosophy, whether it's integrating what we do on the mat and also into life, when they kind of start taking a bite out of that and going in a bit deeper, it's not that I have the answers to everything. I just find it very interesting to kind of open that up to a group and to just chew on certain topics and see different perspectives to things. I just feel like that type of, especially if someone's willing to be a bit vulnerable in the space, it just
Yes.
kind of elevates everyone. And a lot of times when someone's brave enough to ask a certain question, I know that there's probably a few others in the room that have the same thing, or have the same question, and they might not feel safe or might not feel secure to ask. Because I really find that there's just, it's not a sophisticated word, but I just call it like juicy. I like when when things are a little bit juicy and there's just something more.
Depth, and people are going beyond just skimming the surface.
Yeah, and I don't mean it in like a, like we don't, I read a lot about philosophy and things like that, but I don't feel like I need to school people on terms and terminology. And I'm not into like trying to sound smart. I always like it to be clear and grounded and easy to articulate, easy to understand. And, this is real life. And a lot of people, a lot of students who've crossed my paths have taught me so much, when they shine light on a certain topic in a certain way or share a certain experience. I truly feel like it's a two-way street, you know, like maybe they learn from me, but I also learn from them. And I like when certain dialogues are opened up in that way, and when we have space for it, for instance, like in a workshop.
Right. So I'm going to start reading the questions of the viewers that have been emailed earlier.
Okay.
So Ravina asks, when a student first starts practicing with an experienced teacher, why is there a need to be seen or validated so strong? How can teachers create space for the student to be felt, heard, and seen?
I mean, that's a really good question. You know, like it's an interesting thing. So I've in a Mysore space, especially when I think back to starting the program here in Stockholm, I mean, you have your regular students, and then you always have a steady stream every so often of new beginners, right? And it's like, I understand like walking in the door for many people is intimidating just to step through the door because they walk in and they see that it looks as if everyone knows what they're doing, and that can feel intimidating. You know, there's two sides to it. Like a lot of times I start really slow. I mean, if someone comes in their first day, um, I do my best to welcome them, and but also kind of get them started, because it is difficult sometimes to like juggle everyone in the room.
Right.
But I do find that it is important that that initial introduction is so important. That first impression is very important. Um, and I've learned two things with this. Like, usually on someone's first day, we do very minimal. I introduce a few basic key concepts, and it's really going to be like sun salutations, like at most, and doing some, you know, easy seated breathing just to close things out. And there's been, you know, I've made the mistake where I've given too much to a new beginner, where it can one feel overwhelming, or I'm giving so much attention to them that I'm also ignoring the other students who kind of come daily. And then, you know, then the person doesn't come back, and it's kind of like,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, I just spent all that time. So I rather kind of do little bites in the beginning just to see that they also have a certain level of dedication, but at
Right.
the same time, of course, being encouraging, understanding that this is a learning curve. Like, it's going to take a while before you're up to speed and you really feel that you're flowing in the practice. One thing I try to remind all new beginners who walk into the room is everyone in this room has been a new beginner before as well. Just because you see something now doesn't mean that they didn't feel the same things you might be feeling as a new beginner in this space. And you know, I think after a while people start to feel and understand like nobody's watching them, nobody's judging them or looking at them as a new beginner. And I also, you know, we've created a culture too where, you know, our students are very like welcoming of that, you know, of like new energy. It's nothing that people feel there's an attitude toward that type of sentiment when
Or they
someone
don't
comes
feel
in.
left out, or they don't seek your attention when a beginner comes in, because obviously you're giving more attention to the beginner. uh,
Yeah.
so they don't feel like they need to be like, hey, look at me, look at my practice. And
Yeah.
is there an element of like, sometimes students want to show off their practice to their teacher, and say, hey, I did this and you didn't acknowledge me. So how do you address that?
You know, it seems kind of strange, but like we just don't have a culture of that. You know, I don't know what we do. I honestly, we just don't have a culture of that. I don't have students that grasp for poses. I don't have
Hmm.
students that like, I don't know, like, you know, it's like I always try to kind of, through the energy, creating a holistic understanding of the practice, that it's a meditative action. There's an inner stillness. There's a quality to your movement that coincide with learning new postures. And, you know, it's been interesting. Sometimes we create a culture too. When I do give new postures, sometimes I have students saying, oh yeah, really? Like, oh, today? You know, it's like, that's kind of how it's been created in the room. If a student has been a long-term student of mine and they want to broach the topic with me, they can, you know, it's not like I don't create this thing like, oh, don't you ever like ask me
Sure.
about your practice. Um,
Sure.
but I it's that's why I kind of adopted the term. I really, for me personally, I feel like I'm a practitioner's teacher. I'm a teacher for people who really like to practice. They
Yeah.
really love to adopt a practice. It's nothing more, it's nothing less. I love when students own their own energy. I'm not into having some hierarchical power over students. I'm actually so uninterested in that. I like to see students empowered in the practice. Even some of my more advanced students, I look at them with such awe. Like it's not, I know that I've helped them along the way, but I also know that they've done the work.
Hmm.
Like I had to just kind of guide them, but they had to show up and they had to put in the time, and I acknowledge that. So I don't, I look at it like, wow, how beautiful of this student, but also how beautiful this practice transforms. Like I see it all the time, just where sometimes it gives me goosebumps sometimes when you see how students develop and transform by doing the work and showing up. And I just really feel like I'm a facilitator. I'm facilitating that space to just keep everyone um, on their path. I mean, they have to tread the path, but just kind of being a guide, I guess, in one way.
While you were speaking, it reminded me of something that you mentioned even in the workshop, which is that you your methodology of teaching or giving poses or guidance is that, and as you just said, is that the student needs to show up, make the effort,
Mm,
and they need to do 80% of the work, and then you help them with that last mile, the 20%.
mm.
And I find that really interesting. Do you want to say a quick bit on that, and how how you are different?
Yeah, so, teaching, and it's interesting, like, yeah, in a MISA room, there is an element of teaching with your hands, with adjustment, but that's not the only thing. Like I I feel like an adjustment should be teaching something through the
Hmm.
quality of the touch, through the guidance of the touch, and it should be guiding the student to be independent in the posture, not self, um, not reliant on the teacher to do the work. So
Hmm.
I always like with my adjusting with certain postures, I'm always trying to like verbally kind of explain, especially if I'm more hands-on at first. I'm gonna like verbally explain like what's happening as I'm touching them and maneuvering their body so they understand what's happening as I'm doing it. And sometimes it might even feel like a little bit like a broken record, like every time I come to them. But
Hmm.
they might not even be that focused on what I'm saying, but at least it's getting in their subconscious.
Right.
Um, and with certain postures at a certain time, I really want them to get 80% into the pose, and then I can come in with that last 20 and like learning how to slowly back off and have them kind of put more energy into the pose. And that's always my goal when I'm assisting a student. And the other thing that's interesting is like sometimes it comes into this, there's a lot of pride with teachers on how they adjust and oh, there's magic coming out of my hands as I touch you. And it's like, I'm always like, I don't want to give a bad touch, but the other thing is that I'm not a massage. I'm not here to give a massage. It's like I'm really here to teach you to be self-reliant
Hilarious.
in this practice. You know,
Yeah.
and I've had it some time where literally I was getting a full-on massage in a pose, and I'm just like, why? I want like this. I want to keep flowing here, like everyone is going to have different needs, and it's not a bad thing to give like a nice touch or anything like that. But I also feel like ultimately adjustments are guiding students to be more grounded and centered in the pose, to be more self-reliant in the pose over time. Again, a good teacher, I feel like makes themselves irrelevant over time. It's like um, I always, in the back of my mind, want students to be practitioners, that the bridge between their mind and their body and their heart starts to align, and they start to read and understand how their body works. If I'm always interjecting myself and doing overpowering adjustments, they're never going to make that full connection. Their body mind intelligence should start to increase the longer that they practice. And I really feel that that's so important. And over time, students are going to tell me things that I will never know because I do not live in their body, and then I'll be like, yeah, okay, that sounds good. Like maybe this is going to work instead of that. And Um, all of that is important for becoming mature in the practice.
And empowered.
Yes, most definitely. Yeah.
So my next question is from Ashima Suri. She says, Dear Laruga, is it true that a guru can cut short the path of overcoming obstacles and techniques? What are the milestones to look for? How important is the physical aspect of it to achieve growth in one's spiritual journey?
That's a pretty deep one. That's like, yeah, I mean, a guru, the definition of a guru is like it's dispelling the darkness. It's showing you the light, it's showing you the way. But um I feel like in a sense, I don't know, like I don't because again, I feel a little bit like I'm not actually from the culture of India because I know that's really where that kind of that guru relationship has been fostered and everything. And but I really feel like gurus should be quite humble in that, I feel that a guru should be dispelling darkness. It should be bringing the light and shining the light on certain areas of their students to be able to guide for them to ultimately walk the path, to show them where they need to walk. I personally don't think it should be like, it doesn't necessarily have to be this kind of worship, like,
Or placing the teacher on a pedestal.
yeah, because ultimately, if I have had students to try to put me on a pedestal, and it's like, ultimately, you're going to fall off that pedestal at some point, especially if they put you way too high. I mean, you're ultimately going to crash. It's like, because no one is perfect. No one is perfect. Everyone has their flaws. And for me personally, I've had a few very integral teachers in my life, and I've always given respect. I mean, I think that's really important. Like I've never been one of these people to mouth off to teachers and to also kind of to ask questions that are like kind of I don't know. Like I've seen like weird things between like students and teachers, and I always try to remain very respectful in that space, and I really honor it. And I actually really enjoy. There's a lot to learn being a student and that reflection of also being in that role of a teacher. So I feel like it is so important to offer respect to teachers, or if, by chance, if you consider someone a guru. But I feel like I'm not really qualified to like talk about a guru. I really see myself just simply as just a teacher. I don't even, but I love that concept of like a guru being a dispeller of darkness, that, like I love what it represents. And I feel like a true guru is really living that. It's not about being worshiped. But this is something I've learned at a young age. I mean, there's only one thing that I worship, and I personally believe in God, and that's what I worship. So it's like but I think giving people dignity, respect, your elders,
Right.
your
Yeah.
teachers that know more than you. I'm like you have to give respect. It's so important to be humble, and actually, you don't receive the wisdom or the knowledge unless you are humbled, unless
Correct.
you do have a humble heart. It will never penetrate inside of you unless you have that humbleness. And sometimes a good guru will kind of will help you to crack your ego. Like,
Yeah.
because that's the thing too that I think interesting in modern culture is so many teachers want to be liked. Now, with that said, I feel like it's so important that I respect my students. You have to respect, you have to offer dignity to your students. But sometimes I have to tell the truth, like I'm not here just to to groom
And out
them
of
to be
critique.
liked. Do you
Yeah.
know, like
Yeah.
to cajole them so they like me and they like, no, like sometimes I have to be very clear and very straightforward. I try not to be mean, like that's important. But the last thing I think about is to be liked when I'm teaching. I want to be effective. I want to be clear. I want to communicate things properly. And I truly, truly want to see students develop.
That's so
So,
amazing.
but sometimes you got to keep it real. If you want to see a student develop, you got to keep it real. So
Yeah,
it,
you can say the truth without being mean. So I
yeah.
think that's, yeah. So this is actually a related question. This person has requested not to mention the names. So Anonymous says, I want to ask Laruga, the question is a bit long. I want to ask Laruga the below question, but don't want to share my personal information. Sometimes I feel teachers who are male don't trust the power of a woman, or either don't know how to treat a female as a human being or equal. For example, they can be mean to their female partners in the MISO room. I think a teacher can show discipline and respect at the same time. I know we are all human, but shouting at others, including their own partners in a MISO room, is it acceptable? I think unfortunately there is some misconception of like men are more powerful than women, and unfortunately the Ashtanga practice makes it sharper for the man who are emotionally weak. They can use it as an excuse for not behaving the same or teaching you the same, or they are simply bullying. Also, sometimes they don't let you even talk and share what you think or feel. What do you think of these teachers? How do you cope with, especially when there are not so many teacher alternatives around, and especially when they degrade your power and put their efforts mostly on the male students?
Wow,
I've read this
that's a
verbatim,
lot.
so
Yeah. Well, anytime you're degraded, I would leave. I don't care if they're the only teacher in a 100-mile radius, 200, 500-mile radius. No. There's so many tools nowadays. Like, I went through a period myself where I was wanting that next step of growth, and there wasn't anyone in my vicinity. And so I maintained my practice the best I could on my own. And then I traveled when I could, whether that was workshop or just going to someone else's Mysore practice. If I could go for 2 weeks for a vacation, like a week or 2 weeks, those are things that I did for a
that
certain
sounds
period.
just like me.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, that's what I did before. Yeah.
yeah, you have to, when you see these things, um, I just have no space for it. Like, I have had experiences from, I don't, for one, there's many good male teachers out there, so I'm not trying to pigeonhole anyone, but I'm just saying that I've been condescended toward by male teachers, especially like when I'm working in my strength, and I'm working into my potential. I've had people try to water me down and push me down, and what I've what I've realized, after the fact, because it's easy to doubt yourself and to feel like, whoa, is this me? Because, so many people respect this person. Is there something wrong with me? But, when I step back and really see my behavior from an objective standpoint, and I look at the other person's behavior, it truly is insecurity. That this person was insecure to make the comments that he made, and to insinuate certain things and to kind of push me down. And that's really where these types of behaviors come from. And, a strong, secure man is going to be okay with a woman's full power. And both can live in the same space equally. I don't think there's any problem with that. And, when David and I teach, we might have different ways with certain things with certain students. And it's very rare we disagree on certain things, or there might be something that we might be like, okay, like maybe this is a better option for that, but it's always going to be offline. I mean, it's going to be away from students. Or if it needs to be a conversation then and there, it's going to be to the side quietly. I think both of us have learned in that type of relationship, because some people, it might be a couple that's teaching together. It could be also just a collaboration of two teachers working together. I've learned that, like with David, I'm never going to cut down his manhood in front of people. Like I have no desire to do that. I've seen that done before, and it's always like, oh, and I think the same for him. He doesn't feel maybe it's because he's Swedish, because there's a lot of equality between men and women in Sweden, but he's never been intimidated by my strength, my power, the things that I say at certain times. He's never been intimidated by it. And I think it goes to show his security. He's never told me, hey, like, water that down. Like
Hmm.
what, I mean, we've had our like our arguments before,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's one thing that it just hasn't been an issue, which I appreciate from my standpoint. I appreciate that. And this is where students have to listen to their intuition on what seems appropriate in the room. If it does not feel like there's dignity and respect offered, there's no reason to stay or be there.
Yeah. So Sumans asks, Laruga alluded to discrimination faced due to race. I would like her to comment on what does she think about the fact that Ashtanga yoga has largely been restricted to foreigners and not Indians. What could drive that, and why are there not enough or more qualified teachers in India?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I could answer that well. Like, but I will tell you, like, I don't know, this might be controversial to say, but there is a reason why I still, I go to Mysore and my own teacher is Indian, it's like my teacher still is Arshwat Joyce. And the one thing that I started to realize too is there's some Westerners who've gone to Mysore, they've gotten like the knowledge or the wisdom or the method of the practice, and they leave, they profit off it, but then they want to, excuse my language, but then they want to shit on the person who gave them the wisdom. I'm sorry, I am not impressed by that at all. It doesn't impress me. Sure, people have had flaws and there's issues with that, but there's a little bit of a colonialism to that mentality that I just don't stand for.
Sorry, I can't dislike that music for you.
Okay, my Siri just started talking to me. Okay, so that was weird. So that's something that I personally have issue with. I'm not down with that attitude at all. I think there is something to be said. I'm not saying that students who don't come, or students or teachers who don't come from India can't have like that wisdom and knowledge, but I think there is an important aspect of acknowledging the roots of it, where it comes from, and having some connection there. And I personally think it's exciting and it should be cultivated that more Indian students do the practice. And I feel like a wave is starting. I know when I go to Mysore, I see more and more Indian students there. I don't know if that's been a certain initiative put in place, but I find it very exciting that, it's becoming more culturally diverse. I mean, for one, we are in India when we go there. Like, so there should be a large percentage of Indian students. And I always feel like it just adds to the enrichment of the group. So the Indian students that I personally have come across, this might seem strange, but I feel like the yoga is so natural in their bodies. I don't know, like to me personally, I just feel it's so natural, even with someone that's a quote unquote new beginner. So the Indian students that have crossed my path, there's something kind of magical about kind of their bodies and where their mind is, where I feel like many of the students are so ripe for it. So I just hope that it continues to grow and expand. And I think it's also important that as Westerners who are doing this practice, that they need to acknowledge the roots of where it's coming from. And, I find it a bit sad that it's kind of been wrapped up into some package that doesn't really have those roots anymore, as so many offshoots of methods upon methods that have been created in the last like 10 years. It's almost like people just slap on the name yoga to it, but it doesn't always have those roots of that internal awareness that, comes from the philosophy of the practice, or the philosophical roots of yoga.
Okay. Nina asked a question. Laruga is interested in visual arts. And is Laruga interested in visual arts or any other arts? And if so, does she have any favorite artists? there was a question by someone else which basically said, Laruga mentioned somewhere that she's basically an artist and interested in arts. How does she relate this with the yoga practice where there may be somewhat limited creativity? What are the other things she does to keep her artistic side engaged? So there are two questions that I'm asking you.
Yeah, so that was my early interest. It was were the arts for sure, but all types of arts. Like I played an instrument when I was young. I played the violin. I loved sketching and drawing. Um, I loved anything that had to do with creativity, and I still do. Unfortunately, there was a time in my life where I departed from that, but it's something too that I feel that just enriches my life, that anything has to do with creativity. Now it kind of has morphed into more like design. Like I'm really into like design, and even I've been more interested in kind of like interior type of designing. I just love things that are well designed. I'm a big appreciator. Like I love, yeah, I just love anything. It could be like even like this mug I bought, like this, like to me, this like turns me on. I like it's like embarrassing. But it's like I love the design of this thermos.
Yeah.
Like it's minimal, it's well constructed, it's functional. Like, like these are things that I'm very interested in. It's kind of sad. I used to draw all the time, and I haven't picked up a sketch pad and a pencil in a long, long time. It used to be something that would fill me with entertainment for hours, would be drawing and sketching. And but now I feel like I'm more of a consumer and someone that really appreciates art and people who are creative. And in one way, I feel like maybe that'll be the next phase for me, is to do things more creative and to delve into that myself, because I just find it's a really important outlet for me. And yeah, like a lot of times with Ashtanga, sure, it's not creative. The sequence is set out. But I've talked about this before in different excerpts that I've written about, where for me the creative aspect is in the energy. It's like it's internal. So even though it's the same sun salutations or standing poses or the sequence of seated poses, that I play with the energy inside. There's a creativeness inside on even how I enter into poses and how I flow with the energy out of poses, how I inhabit the pose. A lot of times people think creativity is just like, doing something different with your arms or something, but it's also something very present inside of you too. And I really feel like in many ways I play with the energy in the practice. And it's a hard thing to explain because maybe not everyone would always kind of be able to see it on the outside, but that's where my creativity comes into the practice. And then outside of the practice, I just love and I love people who are creative. I think artists are some of the coolest people on earth, and the world needs more art and more artists, because that's how people express themselves, and those outlets are so important.
Yeah. Thank you for that answer. Jasmine asks, can you talk more about stepping out of one's comfort zone, meeting one's edge in practice, and how that translates into life?
Yeah, that's a good question. Whatever scares you, you better walk toward it. That's that's all I have to say. Yes, whatever. Yeah, like the thing is I've noticed that in myself. Like there'll be things that I'm interested in and things I'm interested in pursuing, and I know it's scary. It's like I've learned that no, that's where you need to go, and it's something that can be so exhilarating. Like when I first started just teaching workshops or working with larger groups, it definitely took me out of my comfort zone. But there was a part of me inside that knew that I had something to share. But it petrified me. And it even still today, even though I've taught hundreds of workshops now at this point, there's still a part of me that feels a little bit of resistance and feels a little scared, like leading up to it. I'm nervous. I start to sweat. I start to feel a little bit unsure of myself. And then when I'm finished, I always have a sense of relief. But it's so exhilarating to do it anyway. And, you know, in the practice, we've got to lean into those areas that we're afraid of. Now, we don't have to kill ourselves. It's good to know good technique so we can stay mindful and intelligent in the process. But, you know, those are going to be your most interesting teachers in the practice, is the poses that scare you, that you have heavy resistance around. And it, you know, of course, it's important to have good guidance and awareness, you know, through the help of a teacher and staying calm in the practice. But the practice is a great training ground for this, for it to translate in your life. And there's certain things in my life I haven't wanted to confront. I mean, even now, like, there's a part of me that's very introverted. Like, it's kind of like sometimes even just to have a conversation with people, I'm always like, I guess I should say I'm not a big small talk person. Like, when someone wants to talk about something real, I'm totally down. But sometimes with small talk, I'm always like, you know, and but getting out of your comfort zone is one of the, like, the main things that I bring in, like, when I speak in workshops. It's so important. And everyone's comfort zone, or everyone ever getting out of your comfort zone, or whatever your comfort zone is going to be different for different people.
Right.
But we got to lean in. I mean, there's been poses I was deathly afraid of, and I leaned in, you know, but we can lean in gently. You can lean in gently. You don't have to, yeah, you don't have to just, you know, kill yourself in the process.
You say this a lot, like lean in, especially into the uncomfortable. You say this a lot, and I think that whatever questions or whatever has been asked, which are even uncomfortable, you've always answered them with grace. And I find that deeply inspirational. It's a great learning that I've personally had, where you've always said lean into the uncomfortable, and you know, whatever that one needs to comment on is just to make things better for the future. So I that's my little two bit. You can
Oh, well, thank you for that. You know, I also feel like for teachers, like, if you can't hold the space for everything, if you can't hold the space for people's darkness, you can't hold into the light either.
Yeah.
You've got to, like, I've had students bring up certain things to me where I was open, like, it's if they come in and they're vulnerable and they're grounded in the, like, of course people can create issues and drama, but I'm talking about, like, real vulnerability, real sharing. I mean, I've held space for it, and for friends too. I've held space for it. I don't shy away from it. I mean, there's been times people have asked me personal questions, and when I tell the truth, they just totally, like, they just kind of go the other direction. It kind of leaves you like, you're going to ask, but then you can't even hold it for me. Like, you can't even take that in. But that's where a lot of the healing comes in. I'm not saying that I'm some type of psychologist or, like, you know, all these types of things, but certain things need to be known at times. And what's so interesting is if you're sensitive to it as a teacher, you can kind of read it. There's been certain things where I have felt things with students. Of course, I'm not going to try to draw it out of them. They have to feel that they're okay to share it. Yeah. But then I'll find out maybe weeks later, months later, and it'll just kind of dawn on me, oh yeah, I felt something happening then, you know, like, for whatever reason, it does have a way of showing up. So that's, you know, creating that space in the room too is another part of that healing and that transformation that I found to be pretty special, especially in a MISERT room, in that setting.
That's so interesting. So I'm going to take another 2 questions before we open up for the live.
Okay.
There are so many questions, Laruga. I don't know which one to pick. Valentina asks, how do you think that the practice of yoga can help us to go through these challenging times?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a pretty strong consensus that 2020 has been, like, the hell year. We're only halfway through, so Yeah, because I think many of us thought we were headed in a certain direction, and that was totally sidelined. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. I mean, it's been challenging for so many people. I think if anything, we're kind of in it together in one way. Um, but this is real. I mean, talking about leaning in, this is where we really have to lean in to feel calm and centered in the chaos, because things do feel rather chaotic right now, depending on where you live. And there's been a lot of heavy things happening in the world. Um, there's two sides to it. We have to continue to turn inward and do our practices, whether that's meditation, journaling, yoga practice. Those things are so important. But I have also learned that I'm not shying away from these issues either. I'm leaning in to, waking up to certain things that are happening in the world. I mean, sure, we can get overly obsessed with all these things too. There's a balance, but a lot of things have caused me this year to look at things differently, to make certain changes personally. Um, there's been it's I really feel like these challenges, even though it hasn't been fun, it's kind of opening us up to grow. And I think that's the interesting thing about all of this. Sure, part of me wishes none of this stuff would have ever happened. But on
Yeah.
the other side, we can't change it. It's happening. And we've got to learn to flow with it and come out the other side, hopefully better and more aware. Um, but I have found in times of challenge, we got to lean on these practices even more. And there's two sides to it too. I mean, when life is going good, sometimes we take our practices for granted.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, I don't really like life is good. Why should I even have to like contemplate this or that? Or why should I have to sit on my meditation cushion? It's like, but I find that there's two sides to it. Like we got to keep our practices going. And but in times of challenges, I've received so many messages from people where they're like, this practice has been my saving grace. And
Yeah.
in one way, the beauty of it is some people feel they've had more time to devote to it. And people have told me, like, if it weren't for this practice, I would have gone crazy.
Hmm.
So that really is a testament to it. And I just feel like if there's one thing to take away from it that's positive, it would be that we have that opportunity and more time.
Yeah. And I think all the people who've pushed themselves away from doing self practice
Mm.
have all just have had no choice but to get into a self practice. So I think that's one of the really good things
Yeah.
that have happened.
Yeah. I mean, if there's any time, this is when you have to do it, especially if you can't go to a shala.
Yeah, yeah. So guys, please type in your questions. I'm going to ask another question while we start getting questions. We just have another 12 minutes left on the live. Um, Carolyn says, how has the intense discipline of the Ashtanga practice helped you in your everyday activities and life?
The most, I guess the thing I feel for me personally, because there's of course many things I can improve upon for sure. So I'm not trying to say it's like, and it's going to cure everything in life, but it gives us the awareness to to look at things. Like, you can look at your strengths and celebrate them, but you also need to look at your weaknesses and learn how to work with those as well. But I mean, I've definitely gone through some ups and downs in my life, and there's been certain times in my life where I felt like I've lost so much, and I feel like, and I there's been certain times where I felt like the only thing I had was this practice. And what those practices taught me is just to put one foot in front of the other. I remember especially a particular time where I didn't know, like, I had no money, I had no place to live, but I practiced. I still did my practice. And it just taught me, like, one foot in front of the other. Just get some momentum moving in the right direction. Just, you know, um, even when it's dark, just moving, and the way that this practice is designed, it just you're building things up over time. You're building up, you're building stamina, you're building strength, you're building focus. And so that type of skill set on the mat helped me to understand that with nothing, something can be built. You know, it's just, again, just doing a little bit every day and trying to focus on something positive. And that's been a very important thing for me personally.
So Supriya has a question. What's the one thing that you believe is the most important part of a yoga practice to make it a transformational experience, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally as well?
Yeah, to deal with whatever comes up. The things that you want to avoid, the things about yourself that you don't want to look at, the parts that you judge and criticize. You like, that's the interesting thing, that yeah, you can still go through this practice and accomplish things physically and still be asleep. I mean, that's for sure. And it's, you know, those uncomfortable spaces, like whether that's emotions or dark spots, you have to acknowledge them for them to transform and to release. And it's, I understand like why it can be scary, and sometimes we have to like, we want to dig our head into the sand and be like, nope, it's not there. But it always pulls on our subconscious. It's controlling us, but we don't always realize it. We've gotten used to it. And this is where when these uncomfortable feelings arise, we just have to learn to embrace and hold it and investigate further on why it's there. This might seem kind of more like a general blanket statement, because it's a difficult thing to talk about, because within each individual there could be so many things that arise. And that's why sometimes, and I've seen this in myself, and I've also seen it with some students, sometimes when they start to be more conscious, where this practice kind of allows that, sometimes things get a little bit worse before they get better, because there's been so many things that have been ignored. And when you start to acknowledge it, it kind of shakes your foundation that you thought was strong, but it really wasn't. It was getting ready to crack at any moment. So that's always very interesting. And I've seen that with certain students, where it kind of shakes them up. Some students lean in, and some will actually maybe even quit because they're not ready. And that, I mean, that's okay too. You have to be ready for it, and we've been using this word a lot today, but you got to lean into it.
Yeah. So Wondering Matt Vikram says, what changes do you feel online teaching has brought about for you? Do you think it's a sustainable way to teach Ashtanga yoga? Thank you.
Well, it's the best that we have right now so it's like, so, but
Yeah.
well, this is the thing, even though it was controversial for many people when I posted about it, you know, our Mysore program has continued, and it's never stopped in Sweden. All our students have stayed healthy. So, you know, every single person has. So we can say that with ultimate confidence, because we never stopped. And so that's been really nice that that's continued. But I have done workshops and things online. And it's always, I feel like in a Mysore setting, in Ashtanga, of course, a live teacher is always best, because there's something so energetic about this practice. But again, with the restrictions and the limitations that we have, we have to use the tools that we have in the best way that we can. And it seems like it's been really working for people, even people who've decided to like somehow do the Mysore classes online. Even though, like, when I first heard about it, it seemed a bit odd to me, but at the same time, it's kind of keeping the community together wherever that is. So holding people accountable to continue to practice, and then they kind of get to meet each other online. Whatever is helpful, I think, is good, just to keep communities together and to make it easier for people to be accountable. But I think it goes without saying that a real live setting is always better, you know?
Yeah.
So.
So, is it okay to skip postures because of small injuries, or should you stop? Kareen asked this question.
Well, it always depends on the context of how long you've been practicing and what the injury is from. But I don't tend to have students skip postures. I try to have them make the shape of the pose without aggravating the area of injury, just to kind of consciously, maybe they can't physically do it, but it's almost like mentally they're doing it. I find that there's something really important about that. So never aggravate the area of injury, but just kind of mentally do it, make the shape, even if it's very far away from the pose, make the shape of the pose as best you can, and then move on to the next.
From your perspective, Joe asks, from your perspective, what's the most difficult part of teaching Ashtanga?
It takes a lot of energy. People don't realize. I've had like novice teachers think, oh yeah, no problem. And then they're totally wonked like after one Mysore session. It takes a lot of energy. I don't think people realize how much, especially in those Mysore settings. The good news is that I remember I used to get so much more tired like when I first started, and like the stamina does build, like each year that you put in the time and the experience, it's almost like you can hold more people, more energy, but it's slow. It takes, and you have to be patient. And so, but still, even to this day, I feel the toll that it takes energetically, and I have to kind of fill my own cup and find ways to kind of recoup to be able to, give again the next day. It's very deceiving because if someone were to observe from the outside, they wouldn't really be able to read that.
So I'm going to take one last question. Hi, Laruga. In your years of practice, have you ever thought of quitting the practice? Kim.
No, I don't think so. There's been times I've had doubts, but I've never quit. I never thought about quitting. No, no, no. I think, and I think too, maybe that's one characteristic of mine. There's a stubbornness to me too. I just feel like I'm one of these people that will stick things out even through like the rough periods. Of course, I'm not, some people may quit with good reason, but it's just not something that kind of entered my consciousness.
And okay, I think we have a minute, so we can take. In your last talk, you mentioned that other teachers don't want to collaborate with you. Do you invite other teachers in Shala for workshops as well?
I didn't say that nobody wanted to collaborate.
You said, yeah.
I didn't say it like that.
Say that. Yeah, you said that there's a lack of collaboration.
Yeah, I said in general, it seems like in general terms, but I wasn't like saying that about like nobody wants to collaborate. Yeah, we've had teachers, we've invited teachers here in Stockholm for sure. We've taken a little bit of a break. I think the last workshop we had was Tim Feldman, actually. That was that a year and a half? So that was the last teacher that we had. And then, and we did have plans for having other teachers, but then things really changed obviously for this year. So yeah, I mean, we've invited a number of teachers here for sure. So that's something that we're always very open to. Yeah, especially if it's the right fit. So yeah, that's no problem. Inviting teachers is one thing, but also collaboration is another. Really collaborating, working together with certain events, working together in a way where you're sharing, responsibility and sharing like, yeah, collaboration. It's a sharing, but I find like, this practice attracts like that type A kind of, and sometimes it doesn't always. I think that's one of the dark spots, if I'm just being honest. So.
Oops. Thank you. I'm getting nervous about the time. So we've just got a minute left, and I just want to end this conversation and with so much gratitude for coming in on 3 episodes and sharing so freely. You've given a lot for us to chew on as well. And I'm really grateful for you to, to have, shared this space. And I hope that you can come back for season 2.
Yeah.
And I really look forward to having you and David, in the next conversation.
Yeah.
And thank you so much.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure. It was so much fun. So thank you so much.
Yay. So you take care, and thank you everybody for joining. And we hope that you enjoyed this three-part conversation with Laruga. And do watch out for more information on the next guest teacher. And thank you once again, Laruga.
Thank you.